Okay. So thank you all for being here. You're at the Beard Bros Media Network, their Beard Bros Live podcast on LinkedIn. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brian Applegarth. I'm a cannabis travel subject matter expert and founder of the Cannabis Travel Association, and really excited to be collaborating with the Beard Bros on this podcast, this Beard Bros Live series. And really our goal with this monthly podcast going forward, this Travel Tuesday monthly podcast, is to really celebrate the innovative frontier of cannabis tourism and travel around the world, and shine a spotlight on those doing really interesting things, and just kind of celebrate that that's happening. So thank you for joining us for our first one. Our guest today is Matt Kurth with Humboldt Cannabis Stores. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here for the first Travel Tuesday. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I thought it only fitting, man. Like, Humboldt Cannabis Tours was, if not the first, one of the first operating tours regularly with your tourism knowledge, kind of bringing all that to bear in this cannabis space with tourism and travel. So before we jump in specifically to Humboldt Cannabis Tours, tell us a little bit about you and your background and what you feel led you to this venture and creating this tour company up in Humboldt.
Well, thanks again for having me. I'm Matt Kurth, and I own and operate with my wife Humboldt Cannabis Tours, and we're based out of Eureka in Humboldt, California. And if folks want to check out the website while we're talking, it's humcannabis.com, HUMCANNABIS.com. So I've been doing tourism my whole professional life. So I studied recreation and tourism in college, and I got an associate's degree in outdoor recreation leadership, and then a bachelor's degree in recreation administration. And then I spent about a decade as a whitewater river guide on the American River. I got more than 1,000 days on the river guiding people. And then after that, I managed the Humboldt Bay Aquatic Center, which is like, we did kayak rentals and classes, sailing, stand-up paddle boarding, rafting, surfing, kids camps, all kinds of stuff out of this aquatic center on the Humboldt Bay. And then in 2015, I really started the project working on Humboldt Cannabis Tours. I've been passionate about cannabis my whole life. So that's always, like, the front part of my life's always been travel and tourism. And then kind of the back, more secret part of my life for a long time was kind of cannabis. So I've done a lot of things in the cannabis industry. I've done almost every job a little bit. So I'm pretty familiar with the whole thing. So in 2015, I decided to combine the two and start Humboldt Cannabis Tours. And then I had to work with the county for 2.5 years to get them to allow me to do permits here. And then we did our first tours in 2018, and we've been growing slowly since then. And last year we did about 140 tours for about 400 people. And we're really excited to do cannabis tours. So what we do is we take people out to farms, and we visit the farms, touch the plants, talk to the farmers, answer lots of questions, and we focus a lot on education. People consume, but it's mostly we focus on a lot of education and learning and experience.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I consider, and I think most of the world considers, Humboldt a place of source destination, much like Napa is for wine. When it comes to the craft and the way that cannabis kind of permeates throughout the culture and the community, it's a really special destination because a lot of that source energy and innovation and craft kind of comes out of the Humboldt region. What do you think makes Humboldt special as a destination, cannabis and beyond?
We grow great cannabis here, especially outdoor cannabis, which a lot of us are finding, a lot of people are preferring that now that we have access to testing results and things. And a lot of people find it to be a better medicine as well. So we definitely have some of the best outdoor in the country, I would say. I mean, Oregon's got some pretty great outdoor too, but we're growing definitely some of the best outdoor weed in the whole country here. And we have a lot of legacy farmers. So those are people that used to be illegal and now have transitioned to being legal. And we have a lot of multi-generational farmers. So that's people that have learned from their parents or maybe even their grandparents at this point how to grow. And these, and we have a really tight community of a lot of growers that pass around and share a lot of information and things like that. And that's what makes us really special. Also, we're a repository of genetics. A lot of the genetics that people are smoking and growing these days kind of have their root in Humboldt County. So we're a massive genetic repository. There's so much stuff out there. so many seeds sitting in people's refrigerators that are just amazing stuff that's never really gotten out into the world. And then just Humboldt County is an amazing place to visit, even without weed. You know, we have the redwoods, which everybody should visit. We have some of the cleanest air in America. It's nice and cool here. Like right now, it is 57 degrees and the fog just burned off. So it's a nice, cool place to visit in the summer. We have lots of art. We have great food. We have great music, lots of local food, great local beer, local festivals. So there's a lot going on up here, and it's small. People say that everyone up here is pretty friendly. And it's just a great place to visit on top of the cannabis. Like, it would be a great place without the cannabis, and that just adds it, makes it even better.
Awesome. Yeah, I always find it interesting up there too with the, it feels like there is a lot of hyper local culture, like artists, and it feels like a space where there's always room to march to your own beat when you want to. And I think that is part of the cannabis culture up there, but I also feel that as part of the Humboldt culture in general. Because it's kind of homesteaders, hippies, there's this history behind it. Do you feel that it's unique in that way with these kind of hyper local crafts when looking at, I guess, California or other destinations?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, people here really value local goods and local produced things, and that's been for a long time. I think it does probably have its roots in the Back to the Land movement and kind of DIY movement, things like that. And also just, it's a rural place, and people all over in rural places tend to like do things on their own more and be a little more self-sufficient. It's like a rural value. Yeah. And then when you combine that with the Back to the Land movement and their values, and then plus you combine that, a lot of people don't think about it, but when you're growing weed and it's not legal, you kind of have to do everything yourself. You can't just call a plumber. Like, you've got to be the plumber. You can't just call whatever you need. Like, you've kind of got to do it yourself, or your spot is going to get blown up. So that kind of also has forced us to really hyper focus on local do-it-yourself things. But we definitely, and that's one of the things I love about here is local food, local crafts, local artisans, local art, local music, and we really put a high value on that. And it's one of the things that makes us unique. But yeah, it's finding local stuff that you can't find other places is one of the really cool things about here.
Yeah, that local community, that community value of like self-reliance. I feel like it just naturally dovetails into craft. And then when you layer in this sun-grown craft in a really beautiful region, you really get into this placemaking and this local craft, depending on what the microclimates and what the seasonality is to that, and how the plants grow in different areas, right, of Humboldt County. Can you speak a little bit to sun-grown and kind of how the knowledge is getting further out into the public sphere about the benefits or the differences, even just as simple as that, of sun-grown versus indoor versus greenhouse or mixed light, and why sun-grown specifically is a special travel experience?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Well, so a lot of the weed they grow in other places is indoor. Some states, that's all they grow. In Humboldt, of the legal farms, 98% of it is grown under the sun, either in a greenhouse or full-term outside. So almost all the legal weed we grow here is outside. And I really like to showcase like how special and different the outside is, because there's a perception in the market a lot that the indoor is higher quality, and often it costs more money too. And I think, well, to start off, I think different people, we all like different things about weed, and that is one of the beauties of it, is that we can all like different things. It's a lot like food. Like, just because I like one food and you don't doesn't mean that food is bad. It just means that we all have different tastes and different things that our body needs. So I fully recognize that some people like are always going to like indoor better because it scratches their itch better. But a lot of us are kind of finding out that we like outdoor better. And we don't really know why. We don't have good metrics. We're starting to do some good science on it. So one of the big differences I notice with indoor is indoor often looks better. Like, it's brighter. It's like less beat up looking. It's brighter green. Sometimes it's darker purple. It always looks better. And sometimes it smells like, I would describe it like more loud, like more of a noticeable smell, like a smell that like kind of really pops you in the face. So I think indoor almost always looks better, and sometimes it's louder in the way it smells a little bit. But what we know from testing results is the chemicals are way different. The chemotypes of the two kinds are way different. So what we find with indoor often, also indoor often tests higher for THC on its own.
Okay.
But so indoor looks better, smells louder, and tests higher for THC. But what we're finding for outdoor, it never looks as good because it's kind of out there. It gets more UV light. It's got the wind blowing on it and pest pressure and things like that. So it never looks as good. And often it tests lower for THC, but higher for all of the other cannabinoids. Which what we're finding for a lot of people, that is kind of the important part. There's been so much focus on THC because it's the first cannabinoid we learned about, and it's the first one we learned about that makes you feel high. So there's been a lot of focus on THC, but what we're finding for a lot of people, the enjoyment of consuming cannabis and a lot of the medicine is coming from the other cannabinoids. So what that looks like in the test results is indoor might test like 35% total cannabinoids and then 34% THC. And then outdoor might test like 25% total cannabinoids and 20% THC. But a lot of people like that outdoor better because the difference between those two, we don't know what those cannabinoids are or even what they do sometimes, but we do know that a lot of people like them. So you have a more of a cannabinoid diversity in outdoor weed. And the same is true of terpenes. So the reason like indoor, a lot of times the reason indoor is like louder and more noticeable smell is because it'll be high in a single terpene, but total terpenes are lower. So indoor often has lower terpene diversity and outdoor has higher terpene, like total terpenes, which again is what we're finding kind of scratches people itch. And it's really what's interesting. It's not as loud sometimes, but it's like more complex and interesting. And for a lot of people, it's going to be better medicine. So what we're finding is the outdoor doesn't look as good, but it's more diverse in the chemicals that are there. And that's what a lot of people like. And from an environmental perspective, I don't think there's any environmental argument for growing weed indoor. It takes like 20 times more energy to grow weed indoor. And I think I take climate change seriously. And if we're going to hit these climate change goals, we can't really be growing weed indoor at scale into the future. And there's reasons to grow weed indoors. Like if you live in a state where that's all they allow, like I guess that's what you got to do. Or if we ever make it to Mars, I don't think we will, but if we ever make it to Mars, we're going to grow weed indoors because it's how we have to do it. But really, like, if we can grow weed outside and it's better medicine anyways, that's what we should be doing. And that's what we need to move towards as an industry if we're going to take climate change seriously at all. I forget the number is, but it's like somewhere around 5% of the electricity in California gets used for growing weed. And that's just like, and we don't even know what the number is really, but that's like, we can't really be doing that if we're going to take climate change seriously.
Yeah, I mean, my experience in the travel industry is this is consistently at the industry conferences. They're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, and they're like building an industry that's acknowledging and identifying the top 50 strategies for travel that all point toward this kind of sustainable, regenerative, industry development growth. And I mean, for the cannabis industry at this level, this burgeoning young industry, to start thinking in that way, I think not only is it the right thing to do, I think it actually honors the principles of the plan, which is this kind of like balanced, regenerative. But I do want to just highlight kind of what you said about the spectrum and the fullest and the widest and the most diverse, right? So that sun-grown quality and why it's different than indoor, and it's the natural inputs of nature. So that's pretty exciting. Well, cool. Well, tell us a little bit about Humboldt Cannabis Tours today, and what are the different tours that you offer people in Humboldt County, and do you have anything new coming up to be excited about? So where do your experience products sit today, Matt, in Humboldt?
Well, we offer a bunch of different things. Like if folks check the website out, we offer like 10 different tours of all different kinds of stuff. There's a lot of choices for different kinds of experiences. The shortest, most popular one that we do is the half-day tour. And on that one, we meet at our office in Eureka, and then we jump in my van, and we visit one farm and one dispensary. And it lasts 4 hours, and it costs $150 per person right now. That one's the most popular. We get a lot of people here on the weekend, so a lot of people want to do a longer experience, but they also want to do the redwoods and all the other amazing things we have. So it makes sense to me that none of us have enough time, especially on vacation. So people are trying to do as much as they can. So a lot of people do the half day.
Mm-hmm.
We also offer a full day where we visit 2 farms and a dispensary, and we have lunch in the redwoods. And then we also offer a weed and wine tour where we visit a farm and then go wine tasting in the afternoon. That one includes lunch also. And we also offer some all-inclusive tours. There's a bunch of different ones we offer, but those include hotel and meals. And we have all these other cool experiences built in, like cannabis yoga, sound baths. We do a oyster bake, and we have some local indigenous people come and like put and give the context for the indigenous people in the area, which is really cool. On one of the all-inclusives, we do a homesteading skill share at Soul Spirit Farm, where they show us like how their composting toilet system works and how they make their own power, how they raise their own meat, like all on the cannabis farm, like a skill share thing that people can take that stuff home with them, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And one of the newest products that I'm really excited about this year that we started offering is farm specific tours. So usually I have about 4 or 5 different places that I visit, and usually I pick the best one depending on like what works best for that time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But the farm specific tours, we're going to let the customers choose which farm they visit now. So like a really popular one of the farms we visit is called Catch a Cloud Farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you can book a specific Catch a Cloud tour if that's what you want to see. There's another one we visit. It's a nursery. So if that's what you want to see, you can make sure you visit that. Just gives the guests a little more choice with what they get to see and learn about.
Amazing. I mean, talk about really connecting that consumer to the farm that they purchase, right? So if they're buying that in the shop where they live, hopefully, and or know how to access that farm going forward. We see this in wine, right? To meet the winemaker. And once you have that emotional connection and that becomes part of your life experience stamp, then you have a direct connection to the place of source and the farmer that's farming your pot and how they're growing it and where. And when you can visualize all that, all of a sudden that relationship with that product is more enhanced. And especially with a product like cannabis that's so intelligent and nuanced, it feels like that kind of emotional and spiritual connection to place, is a place that tourism really comes into play. Talk a little bit more about there's a big push right now in travel about really unearthing native culture and indigenous cultures and traditions and rituals and travel. I see a lot of that happening, not just in California, but Canada and throughout the United States. Humboldt, I think, and the North Coast in general, and California has a lot of these really important stories to tell and beautiful stories to tell. I've noticed you integrated that when I went on your full day tour a couple of years ago. Can you just go a layer deeper on kind of the indigenous landscape of Humboldt and how that's naturally folds into your, cannabis tour experience?
Yeah, so we have, it's awesome. And we have a lot of indigenous folks up here. Like both my neighbors here are indigenous. We have the largest federally recognized tribe in California here. That's the Yurok tribe. The Hoopa tribe is another really big tribe. They still teach Hoopa at the high school there. And both of those tribes also is a couple of a handful of tribes in the United States that still live on the core of their ancestral homeland. Like the Yurok tribe and the Hoopa tribe have never gotten moved. Like they still live in the same place they've lived for thousands of years, and they still have that like deep connection to place. Like they never left ever. They fought and managed to like keep the core of their homeland, which is amazing. And then the tours start in Wiyot territory. And yeah, there's a really rich indigenous culture here. It's really, really cool. And they're not too involved in cannabis. All the tribes up here have kind of chosen as a tribe, like the government of the tribe has kind of chosen not to get involved in cannabis. That's not true everywhere. Other places, like other tribes, have kind of gone whole hog. And I really support whatever the tribes want to do. Like they're sovereign and they should do what they want to do and what they think will benefit them the most.
Right.
When you ask them about cannabis up here, I think their perspective that I hear most often is, and this is the tribal government, not the individuals, is that they like have a unique history with Europeans and white people and substances like alcohol and other drugs. So they're just like hesitant because they kind of have this unique history that a lot of indigenous people have of like not going well for them. So I kind of understand their perspective, and I respect it. And then there's lots of tribal members, individuals that are involved in cannabis, of course, because they're our neighbors like everybody else.
Right.
But I do think it's important that we like bring them in to every tour, because it's important. It's like it's like they created this landscape that we're growing weed in now, and we owe it to them. We're growing weed on their land. Like, we're profiting on land that was frankly stolen from them, and they haven't got the benefit from it that they need to. If anything, they've got like all the downsides and none of the upsides. So I think it's like the least we can do is acknowledge their presence and highlight them and try to like shift business up to what they're doing. And there's some really cool things going on with tourism. The Yurok tribe, all the people up here or many of them are canoe people. So the canoes were a very important part of their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of rivers. And the Yurok tribe actually, with a group of young people, built a redwood canoe from scratch. And then now they're doing tours on the river on that canoe, led by indigenous people on the river on their homeland.
Wow.
And it's really, I haven't done it yet, but I'm really excited to go up and do that canoe ride. And it doesn't have a lot to do with weed, but like, it's just a really cool thing to do up here. And, the tribes, the governments, and the weed are kind of separate up here, but we all occupy the same space. And I think it's important that we, at the very least, acknowledge them, and we need to like make sure they benefit. Even if they're not selling weed and growing weed, they need to benefit from us using their land.
Right. Yeah, absolutely interesting. I mean, I also think of the Humboldt County Experience brand as including stories of Bigfoot and redwood trees and some of these signature stories of place. When you think of that intersectionality, I guess I'm specifically now thinking too about the story of kind of the Bigfoot legends through the native lens, and I think this intersectionality in travel is something special, just like you have weed and wine tours, down to the data. For those of you in the industry watching this, the data shows the cannabis travel audience skews higher as a wine enthusiast than the average leisure traveler. And just the recent data set from MMGY Travel Intelligence shows that just below visiting a cannabis shop, the next activity of interest for travelers is the idea of having a curated experience, whether that's a tour or sampling room or a tasting room. The idea of having something curated and guided and storytelling throughout really has risen to the top two activities of choice, which sits above a lounge or just a general consumption space, which we see so often in market. You have the lounges like in West Hollywood that are crushing it and are completely full, that have integrated cannabis alongside food and beverage, and it's a full 360 experience, add cannabis. And then you have the lounges that looks like someone's living room where they threw a couch and no one's in it. And it's showing that this audience today really wants a curated experience, whether that's a kind of a tour or storytelling, tasting room, sampling room, or pairing or something of this sort.
No, that's a critical point. Like, I think the curated thing is really interesting and really, really important. I think like even in like very recent history, and I think in the future it's going to be even more important. And what I'm finding is that is really what people value. And what they're really looking for is they want locals to tell them what the best stuff to do around. And I think that's happening in an accelerated way, even in the last like 6 months or a year, I've noticed. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because frankly, Google is going downhill. Like, Google is not what it used to be. I mean, if you haven't noticed, like, just think about it next time you try to Google something. It's not really what it used to be. It's not returning good results. And that's a whole huge conversation that I'm not an expert in. But all of these tech platforms seem to me like they're more driven, and this is more of a recent thing, they're driven by investment cycles more than they're driven by like creating a product that is usable. And I think Google nowadays, and a lot of these sites, like I would put TripAdvisor and Yelp in the same boat, they're not really interested in providing results that people want. They're interested in driving investment cycles. And I think AI is a big part of that. Like, I'm not a big believer in AI. If I had $1 billion, I would not be putting in AI. Everything seems like it's a future promise. They're not delivering on what's happened now. ChatGPT came out a year ago, and like, look what we've seen in the last year come from that. It was supposed to replace everybody's job in a year, and now they can't do anything they couldn't do a year ago. And I think like everybody putting all their money in the AI stuff, and it's just failing. And I think it's just causing all these sites that people rely on, like TripAdvisor and Google and Yelp, they're just not good anymore. And I think people, maybe they don't recognize why, but they're just not getting what they need out of these things that everyone has depended on for the last 10 years. So what people are depending on now is us to curate it for them. Because people, and I think that's not going to change. I don't think these tech companies are going to pull their heads out of their butts anytime soon. I think they're on this investment cycle train until it collapses. You know what I mean?
Right.
So but that's an opportunity for us, because frankly, I can't be Google. I'm never going to compete with Google, but the shittier Google gets, the easier my job gets. So I think that curated thing is more important now than ever, even more than it was 6 months ago. And I think 6 months from now, it's going to be even more important. And that goes not just for tourism, but cannabis brands and stuff too. Like if you've got a brand and you're depending on Leafly, for example, I don't know if that's a good strategy into the future, because Leafly, frankly, I think they're going to do the same thing. And Weedmaps, they're all these tech companies are on the same, like they're not providing the service that people need. They're trying to drive investment cycles. And I think that is an opportunity for us to take advantage of, because I'll never be Weedmaps, but the shittier they do, the easier our job is if we can fill that gap. So I think that's a really important point. Like, it's a huge opportunity for us, because like the shittier those places get, the better the opportunity is for us if we can capitalize on it.
Totally. Well, I feel like that kind of dips back into going to, it's the quality of information, right? Like if you're getting the information from the place of source, you being the place of source tour company, then you're going to get information that's kind of probably the highest quality information for a wonderful experience, especially in travel, because that gets diluted. And once you start making pay for play stuff, I just had this happen to me actually at a hotel I stayed in Amsterdam. You know, it makes me distrust some of the booking engines, because the way it was sold, pitched, marketed, advertised, it wasn't really clear. It sold it just enough to where I booked it with a little bit of a red flag. Sure enough, when I got there, it wasn't a great experience. My trust is fractured at that website. I won't book off that website again. And it's a big engine, but I feel like it's not being truthful, or I'm not able to communicate with it in a way anymore that has integrity behind it and like what I'm looking for. And I
I'm
think
finding that across all platforms. Like I'm seeing it on like almost every platform that is a publicly traded company, because I think that is the core of it.
I see this too in cannabis, honestly, the industry side, this pay to play, some of the speaking and panels, the more you see brands and then the programming gets bought up versus being the most qualified expert to be able to deliver information. That's a fascinating space to watch shift too from the gray market days
and buying shelf space. Like that blows me away that a lot of dispensaries, this is kind of a dirty secret, but a lot of dispensaries sell shelf space.
Right.
Like they're not putting the best stuff forward. They're putting up like what someone pays them to put up front. And like, it's not good for the customers, and customers are figuring it out. They're not idiots. Like the customers know, they're not stupid. Like people know what good weed is. Like that's the thing. I think a lot of people that are newer to the cannabis industry, they don't give the customers enough credit. Like people that buy a lot of weed know what good weed looks like, and you can't fool them with like fancy packaging or whatever, you know, like people know what's good and bad, and they just have to try it once to know, you know?
Yeah. Well, interesting. So let's talk about partnerships for a second. For all those brands and retail shops and lounges or event producers, all of those are tourism products in cannabis today. Anywhere you have consumption and serve the public. This could be a demo or an activation in a lounge for a brand, or it could be a more sophisticated strategy like some brands are doing today. They're looking at travel, tourism, and destination marketing and the cannabis travel audience and saying, how do I tap into the $150 billion California industry for this state, right? So what have you learned when you've approached, because just to tee this up a little bit, the way Matt's built his ecosystem, from what I've observed as a tour passenger and as just a supporter and an ally early on in this travel discussion for cannabis, is how you've built that ecosystem where you have like a nursery occasionally, you have partners in different ways, whether it's the oysters, whether it's visiting a cannabis shop or these farms. And one of the most amazing experiences that I experienced was visiting a dry farm and learning about the dry farming craft of Humble, which I think is such a beautiful sub niche of content and experience opportunities. So talk a little bit about how you have approached your partners, what ones have worked well, and let's drill down on maybe the 3 areas where you believe that you bring value to them the most. So people can understand this a little bit more.
Yeah. So, well, first, how I kind of got all the folks that I visit is just like the old fashioned, like relationship building, network
Yeah.
building. I didn't really know any of these folks until I started the business. Like, they're not my old friends. So I kind of just had to make a bunch of cold calls, invite a lot of people to coffee, um, have friends introduce me to people, try to speak on panels, try to like go to like we used to have a lot of networking events and stuff like that, specifically for cannabis. And we went to those. So it's kind of just old fashioned network building. And then eventually I found people that were interested in tourism. But it's not for tourism, not for everybody. So first of all, tourism is by definition, you're dealing with the public. So that means all of the good and the bad that comes from dealing with the public. So if dealing with the public is not something that you want to do, maybe you don't want to do tourism because they're kind of they kind of go hand in hand. Or maybe somebody at your company wants to do tourism but you don't, but whatever, which is fine too. But if you don't want to deal with the public, if that's not your bag, then you gotta either hire somebody who does want to deal with the public, or maybe it's just not for you. You know what I mean? So there's that, first of all. And then also, in Humboldt County, not every farm is allowed to have the public. So the farmers also have to have a permit from the county, which is not true anywhere else, but here they do. So that's another thing, is helping farmers do that. And then just trying to figure out how to make it benefit the farmer, because clearly the farmers, it's important to them that it benefits them, but also it's equally important to me, because if it doesn't benefit them, then they're not going to want to do it, and my customers aren't going to have a good experience. So it's really important to me that the farmers like see a benefit. Like, if the farmers aren't benefiting, like I'm not doing my job. So kind of what that looks like is different for different farmers. So most farmers want to make some money, and so I don't like it, but we're all trapped in capitalism together. So we all have to make money here. That's the goal. It sucks, but we have to pay the mortgage. So we pay per head to farmers, but it's not really that much. We pay like between $30 and $50 per person per visit to the farmers, which isn't really enough, to be honest, because most of my tours are pretty small size. So it makes a lot of sense. It's good for the farmer when I can fill the van up, but when I don't usually fill the van up. So that's kind of the secondary thing. It's like last year, the farmer we paid the most, we paid her $3,000. So, I mean, $3,000, it's nice, but it's not like a game changer for anybody yet, you know?
Okay.
So there is some money, which is good. Also, it's brand building. So everybody who goes on the tour wants to buy that weed forever. Like, they'll buy, like, you've got a lifetime customer at that point, usually, if they have access. And that's the hard part, is a lot of people come on the tour and they want to continue to buy weed forever, but they don't have access because either they don't live in California, or the farms we visit are so small, they have like limited distribution or things like that. So that's one of the challenges, is figuring out like how to let these people keep buying weed like into the future, because they want to. Like, those people leave and they're a lifetime customer, but we've got to let them buy it. That's really the harder part. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a big benefit. And then also, to be honest, a lot of the farmers really like it. I get because they're not making a ton of money off of it, and the branding is good, but it's kind of nebulous and it's hard to measure, frankly. You know what I mean? But the farmers, they all really enjoy it. And I think being a farmer, any kind of farmer, especially a weed farmer, it's pretty isolating. And the way the regs are in California, you're really separated from the consumer. And there's not really an opportunity to ever meet the consumer unless maybe you go like hang out at a dispensary, a table, or something like that. So the farmers really get a lot of juice out of talking to the people, because farming, like, at least in Humboldt, like, people are pretty downtrodden right now. Like, people don't feel good. Like, people aren't making a lot of money. It's a lot of work. It's not like going great for people. They don't like wake up stoked to be a farmer most days. Then the customers show up and they are wildly excited. Like, they're having the best day of their life. And it's like it kind of buoys the farmers, and it really like reminds them like why they're doing it, how important it is. Because you spend all day looking at spreadsheets and it starts to suck. But then you meet somebody whose like life has been changed by cannabis, or maybe even their life has been changed by that visit, or they flew across the country just to come visit that farm.
Yeah.
And it really makes the farmers kind of just feel good about what they're doing and kind of remember like why they're doing it. Because most of the farmers in Humboldt, to be honest, didn't start growing weed to make money. Like, they need to make money, and that's why they grow weed and stuff. But it's not like they didn't get into it to be as a business. You know what I mean? Like, they got into it because they needed a little extra dough, or maybe to like, because they were a medical patient or whatever. But they're kind of forced to just think about dollars, and it's really helpful, I think, to them to kind of take it back and look at it from the big picture of like, no, this is really important what we're doing to people out there, to real, actual people. It's really, really important. Yeah, and I think that's, to be honest, like that, I think is one of the main reasons they do it. And they think it will get better in the future, which I hope so too. But everyone's kind of hoping we'll get more tourism in the future, so they're building towards that. They get paid, brand building, and they enjoy it. They really do enjoy it.
Okay. Yeah. And I think you're drawing out too a part of travel where, you're at a place of source region, multi-generational, like you said, this do-it-yourself kind of self-reliant nature of growing your own food and vegetables and medicine. And that still exists there if you get to meet those farmers, and it kind of fills their cup too, because it's so authentic and they love the craft. They love the plant. That's the interesting part about today. When I see some of the bigger ventures coming into play, it is all spreadsheets, and that is absolutely all it is. And it is 1000% business. And that emotional connection and care where you're thinking of the end consumer as a human being through a patient lens, and the energy you're putting into this plant that is growing on your property out in the sun in Humboldt is just a different sandbox than this kind of new industry that's attracting more people that really kind of like have a very different North Star in mind, which is just economic success on a new burgeoning industry. So I think that's a long way of kind of my spin on this is I feel like travel is really a vehicle to support these legacy producing regions to be able to sell craft flower, talk about culture, talk about this kind of cannabis lifestyle that existed where cannabis was a core part of it, but there's this whole community and relationship to nature that's a bit different than this kind of mainstream industry that's starting to kind of take foot. And you allow access to that through Humboldt Cannabis Tours, to this very rare, special experience. When it comes to brand building, do you think that there's a strategy where that brand, after you, let's say I'm a farmer, you take them to see me on my farm, I talk about the craft, they look at my flowers, they kind of soak in the atmosphere, the setting, and then they go away, they can't buy my flower back in another state. Is there a way to keep that communication strong where you're keeping the attention of that through ancillary products and storytelling? I do feel like tourism is largely marketing in a lot of ways, is what I'm kind of driving towards. So how do brands keep that emotional tether without letting go of that from that opportunity? What do you think?
I think it's a big challenge. I think like, the merch, like every time you put that t-shirt on, you kind of think about it a little bit. That's one way. Social media is another way. If you have a good social media game, that's a way to like keep up with those folks, but you have to provide them value. You can't just like send them pictures of your flower. Like you have to like give them a reason to come to your social media and give them something besides like a photo, maybe, you know what I mean? Yeah. Another way to do that is with newsletters. I know Soul Spirit Farms has a really good newsletter, and they crush it with their newsletter. And I think the reason they crush it is because they do provide value. It's not just like, hey, this is a picture of our weed, buy some. Like they're talking about like homesteading skills. There's like little things about history. There's little things about science. And I think that really is the key. Like you got to give people something, and more than a photo and an ask to buy something. Like it's an exchange, and what we're getting from them is their eyeballs, but what we need to give them for that is something that they value. And a lot of times I find it's information. Like people are really starving for good, solid information. There's not a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of bad and disinformation too. And people are really, really hungry for like solid, good information. I think that's a great way to like build that. But it's a challenge because all that stuff has a cost, and those people aren't buying weed, and you're spending money on all those things. So that's like the balance of like, how do we do this?
Mm-hmm. Great. So if you have a brand or a shop or a lounge sitting in the audience today, last question, what would be kind of your takeaway statement as to the benefits of partnering with a tour company or thinking about a tourism industry strategy? So if you were trying to entice somebody or make the case, what would that case be for why it warrants investing in with your time and resources?
I mean, for me, like my core value for the company and myself, to be honest, is like what I'm trying to do, like my mission or whatever, is to deepen people's relationship with the plant and the people who grow it. And I think what springs out of that is business. Like that is that is the moneymaker. You know what I mean? Like deepening that relationship. I think the more ways we can find to deepen the relationship between the plant and the people, the better we can market to them. And that's really where my focus is, deepening that relationship. And if you think about it with food or wine, that's how it works. Like, you're not going to buy fancy cheese until you until you develop a relationship with fancy cheese, to be honest, or wine, for example. Like, the relationship comes before the purchasing. And then the deeper that relationship gets, the more, frankly, money people are willing to spend.
Right.
You're not going to buy $100 bottle of wine if you don't have a deeper relationship with wine. Like, the people who have shallow relationships with wine, they drink boxed wine, which is fine. That's cool. Like, Franzia makes a ton of money and people like to drink it, and that's not a problem. But that's why they have to sell it in a box for cheap, because those people don't have a deeper relationship. So how you sell a lot of product and get a value added price for it is by deepening that relationship. And the best way to do that is face to face. Like, you can do it on social media and stuff, but it's so difficult because everyone's trying to do that. And having somebody on a farm or in your facility or talking to them face to face, tabling, anything you do face to face is going to deepen that relationship. And I think if we focus on deepening relationships instead of increasing profits, the profits will come from those deeper relationships. And that's kind of my business philosophy. And to be honest, like, I'm not getting rich. Like, it hasn't worked out. Like, I don't have a gold toilet yet. You know what I mean? But just from a ethical point of view and a personality point of view, that's where I put a lot of my focus is deepening those relationships and then hoping that the value will come from that. That's kind of been my philosophy.
And the relationship is twofold: the relationship with the plant, and then you said the
people who produce it.
The people who produce it.
Which could be a hash maker too, for that matter. You know what I mean? Or whatever, you know what I mean? The nursery, they're producing it. The hash maker's producing it, Yeah, so I think if we can all deepen relationships with the plant and the people who produce it, that benefits all of us. Well, at least it benefits small producers. Frankly, that's who I'm concerned with. Like, I think there's plenty of room for big producers.
Yeah.
I mean, I got no problem with them, but it's just not like the world I operate in, or like where I have a lot of my concerns,
Yeah, and you do see those with the Jelly Bean factory tours, the Coors Light factory tour in Golden, Colorado. There is
Hershey
a state
tour.
Exactly, Hershey. There's manufacturing strategies in tourism. Or you look at Lagunitas, right, where they're put through 30,000 people a year through tourism who walk out with bags of merchandise and they're walking billboards.
Yeah, and that's probably 30,000 like forever customers if they can buy the beer.
Yeah, absolutely. So the power of travel. So deepening relationships, from
Matt. That's like those places are doing the same thing. Like the Jelly Bean Factory is deepening your relationship with jelly beans. It sounds weird, but like that's what's happening there. Is like you come away with a deeper relationship to those jelly beans, which then is probably going to make you buy more jelly beans.
What came up for me from the partnership development point of view when you're building your architecture for Humboldt Cannabis Stores is finding like-minded, shared value partners, right? So people that can hear your mission about deepening relationships with the plant and people that produce, that really resonates with them, where now it's a shared mission. And I think so finding your tribe, so to speak, or your partners where you can work in an authentic way, where you're both working towards something higher than the bottom line and trying to compete in some weird level, is to create one ship with this kind of North Star that's similar from a value perspective. And I think cannabis industry especially is a very interesting conversation when it comes to that, because it's very nascent and you have this incredible human rights history and this kind of spirit of activism that's just built into this industry inherently.
Maybe I'm old fashioned, but like I put a lot of emphasis on that mission and I put a lot of time into it. Yeah, maybe I'm an old fart, but I think it's important because that mission is everyone on the tour. That is their mission. Like, I want to deepen relationships. The customers also want a deeper relationship, and the farmer wants a deeper relationship. So it's not just my mission. Hopefully, it's also the farmer's mission, and frankly, also it's also the guest's mission. Like, they are also wanting to do that. So when all three of us, who it takes, because we all need each other to do a tour. Like, the tourists need me, I need the tourist, and the farmer needs us. We all are in this synergistic relationship. And if we all have the same mission, then we can really do some really cool synergy stuff. And I think that's an important thing. If you and the farmer and the guest all have different missions, you're bound to fail. Like you all have to have the same goal for the tour, which for
Yeah.
me is deepening relationships. And it can be other things too. Like maybe it's to get as high as you can. Like that is some cannabis tours. Like we're just going to get as stoned as we possibly can.
Yeah, totally.
But if that's going to be the mission, that should be everybody's mission.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
it's not the problem. Like if the guest doesn't want to get as high as they can, but the farmer and the tour guide do, that's a problem. Or you know what I mean? Like everyone's got to have the same mission, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like I experienced that with that Amsterdam hotel situation. It was misrepresented. There was confusion. I showed up. It was a bad experience. Brand tarnish, not just the hotel, but Amsterdam. Right. So it's like, and that's that destination brand management, destination marketing. And a destination could be a destination within a place, you know? So, but you know, back to your point, the alignment of values and mission as you strike partnerships is vital in tourism, I think, as well, because you're creating an ecosystem where we have to reinforce each other and work as a team. So making sure that we're on the same page, working as a team, is key. Well, cool. Well, any last parting words, Matt?
I love talking about tourism. People can call me anytime if they have questions or shoot me an email. Or check the website out. It's like I said, the website is Hum Cannabis, HUMCANNABIS.com. Or folks can email me at info@humcannabis anytime. It's just questions, if you want to chat, or anybody wants to talk about tourism, or if you're thinking about getting into it, or if you want to organize tours to come out here and sell them, or if you just want to come out on a tour. We do a lot of, like, probably a third of the people that come on the tour are either in the business or thinking about getting into it. So we have a lot to share, and our farmers love to talk to business people. Like they really love it. And really, like, I've never heard a farmer not answer a question about like nitty gritty, like how much profit do you make? How much does this cost? What does your margin look like? How do you do this? Like the farmers don't really have a lot of secrets. So there's a lot to learn if you're in the business or thinking about getting into it, especially. I think we have a lot of value for people that are thinking about getting into it, because it's kind of like a crystal ball. You can kind of see maybe some of the opportunities and challenges that might face you when you start it. So yeah, come out and do a tour, or just check us out, or just come out and see the redwoods. It's awesome.
Right.
And call me. I love to talk anytime. Oh, and my phone number is 530-503-5602. But yeah, give me a call, bounce ideas off of me. If you want to collaborate on any kind of projects, I love collaboration. As long as you want to deepen relationships, that's what I want to do. And thank you so much, Brian, for having me, and thanks to the Beard Bros for highlighting tourism. I really appreciate being here, and thanks so much. I really appreciate everyone's time.
Awesome. Matt, thank you for being our first guest on Travel Tuesdays. This is Beard Bros Live, the Beard Bros Media Network. Brian Applegarth signing off. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Matt.